I'm excited to make this map of adulthood because I'm 44 years old, and until quite recently, I have not had a sense of what being an adult was. Meaning, I didn't feel that I was an adult, and I didn't have a clear sense of who was an adult, and I was certainly clear that it was not being grown up. And so, what was it? And why would I be interested in it, etc.? And so, I'm going to map it out in a way that covers some of the territory. And what I want to suggest, first of all, is that it is a state of responsibility, meaning a state in which we have the ability to respond consciously, intelligently. And if we remember the definition of intelligence as the efficiency with which energy, time, money, natural resources is transformed into human well-being, physical, emotional, mental, financial, logistical, spiritual, the different dimensions of well-being, then the responsibility, our ability to respond, is an ability to respond intelligently. And the adult is a generator of well-being, starting at the center and working out, because they create well-being. Now, we have adulthood, which then comes down to responsibility, which breaks down into the ability and the willingness to respond. The ability and the willingness to respond breaks down into having the energy, the resources, and the desire, and the knowledge. Meaning, if I know how to make a nice pancake, and I have flour and eggs and oil and milk and frying pan, etc., and some maple syrup, but I feel hostile and resentful and I don't want to do any of that, well, I can't make a pancake. So the ability and willingness to respond breaks down into the desire. And there's an art in creating that desire that includes honoring the emotional body, which includes honoring the environment that elicits the emotional body, which involves honoring the inner world that helps to participate in our perceptions of the world. So there's a lot that goes on in being able and willing to respond, whether it's creating a pancake, creating a fortune, creating a successful nonprofit, creating a new house, creating a good marriage. The ability and willingness to respond intelligently is the domain of the adult. And you need resources, you need knowledge, and you need the will. And you need, of course, to respond to that, because if we have all the resources we need but no will, meaning you look at immigrants coming to the United States with no money, the inability to speak English, and going against a racial headwind, meaning we are a racist country. And so if you are of a certain race or a certain religion, and you don't speak English and you don't have any money, and yet you're still able to, within 30 years, amass a fortune. And someone else lives here, has all the social status, etc., and after 30 years is able to amass a debt and a depression and an addiction. It's not an issue of knowledge and resources, but wanting. Or wanting to look at things like family history and intergenerational abuse cycles. And so it is the ability and the willingness to respond to create well-being that is the domain of the adult. And it's an ever-ending process, meaning if we say, well, I want to make this movie about adulthood, and I don't have a camera, but I want to do it. Well, can you go buy the camera? Well, I want to buy the camera, but I don't have the money to buy the camera. Well, can you go and do some work? Well, I want to do some work, but I don't know how to do anything. Well, can you go to school to learn to do the work? Well, I don't want to go to school. Okay, well, then that's the end of that train. You are not able and willing to respond. The entire thing collapses because when you get right down to it, you're not able and willing to do the thing that would create intelligence, that would allow you to be intelligent. In other words, to efficiently use your time, money, and natural resources, as well as your imagination, all of these different resources to create sustainable well-being. Or it's more fun to lie around and complain than it is to go out and do something. And so it comes back to responsibility. Now, part of responsibility, and there are different pieces in this constellation, is transcendence, meaning it's not getting stuck on one thing. It's not like, okay, I refuse to go to school, I hate to be going to school. Well, if you respond to that, it's like, well, why do you hate school? Well, I'm always humiliated and this and that and the other, and I don't get to do what I want, and the curriculum is stupid anyway, and da-da-da-da-da. And then, again, the adult is the one who responds. So you say, okay, well, what do you want school to be like? Well, I want to be studying this subject. And I want to be doing it one-on-one with mentoring, and I want to be doing this, and I want to be doing that, and when bullies, tease me, I want them to shut up or leave the class, or, I want to be able to be out of a school of bullies. It's like, okay, well, let's respond. Let's write down a thing of all the things you want to learn. Let's write down a list of all the things that you can do to learn those things. And let's call up 10 mentors a day. Will you be interested in mentoring me one-on-one? I'm interested in this subject and this subject and this subject. And I'll clean your house for you. I'll do this. I will appreciate you. You can tell me how I can be useful. No. Okay? You respond. Could I have done that any better? Or was that just a crabby, busy person? Okay. Let me call someone else. And it's a constant process of responding. And it's a very dynamic and meta process where the adult is the one that is not stuck in the particular moment. I feel depressed. I feel lonely. I feel miserable. I want to die. I hate it all. I'm too tired to think about this. And I don't want to think about that either. The adult is the one inside that says, tell me more. No, I don't want to tell you more. That's enough thinking of that now. The adult is the one that says, okay, what would give you some energy right now? How could I help? It's like, well, I want to watch TV. And the adult is the one that responds and says, well, watching TV is not going to deal with this or that or the other. And then he listens and, well, I don't care, but I'll have played out my revenge and this and that and the other, and after binge watching 10 shows, then I'll write my goals. And the adult is the one that responds. Well, you never seem to follow through on that, so why don't you write one goal now, start the document, then we'll watch a show, then we'll write another goal, and then we'll watch the next show, and then we'll write another goal, and after your 10 binge watching, you'll have 10 goals. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, then I'm not going to go along with the binge watching and this and that. And so there's a role of discipline, the healthy parenting role within the self. There's a role of bargaining. There's a role of intelligence. And the adult is your best friend. The adult is the one that wants the best for the best part of you. And this is why it's so elusive in our culture, as many of us have never had a best friend. Our parents used us in various ways. Our parents lied to us for their benefit. Friends' parents didn't stick up around this or that. Our teachers didn't focus on saying, hey, kids, this is bizarre. I don't know why we're teaching you this. This isn't going to help you in your life. I'm just required to do this by law. It's crazy. In fact, read this book. It'll give you a good clue on the absurdity of education, and maybe you'll be able to get your parents to come round. And I'm willing to lose my job to point this stuff out to you because I care about you. Algebra, I've never used it in my life. Sales, you need to learn sales. Writing Shakespearean essays. No, let's write letters to the mayor about what needs to happen here and here. Let's write, I as a teacher, I'm overwhelmed with crap. I'm not able to teach you useful things. Let's write some letters to the Board of Education. And then let's make a documentary. They're very useful. Meaning if you can make documentaries as students, you'll be able to have YouTube channels, very useful things. So let's do that. And I'm going to probably get fired. So let's have a documentary about how teachers get fired in the United States for doing good teaching. And let's teach your parents how to think, because most people in our culture don't think. They're just going to say, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't like this. Stop listening to that teacher. But what you really need to do is go into the world knowing how to think. Well, this is, of course, a tremendously engaging and fascinating class. Kids very interested in this. And suddenly education is incredibly interesting. But most of us never had a single adult that was willing to lift the veil on the stupidity, on the absurdity, on the inefficiency, on the lack of intelligence, on the corruption in our entire system and power structure, to say, you matter more to me than this absurdity. And here are the truths you need to know. And when I read about them at times, students who have had teachers like that, and those students are so devoted to those teachers because they're told the truth. I think this is one of the big medicines of Jordan Peterson is, regardless of the whole, enmeshment with Christianity and all of its absurdity, because you can't aim at an equal culture in which men and women share power equally, when the head honcho of your whole paradigm is an angry old man. And it's, and we, of course, paint God as an angry old white man, even though he was probably, more of a Muslim disposition, if Jesus was his son, born over in the Middle East, etc. And so, you can't just say, oh, men and women are equal, but I'm going to all believe in a whole infrastructure in which God is a man. That's absurd. That's the ultimate pinnacle. That has to include the feminine, or it's a faulty paradigm from the start. And Jordan's not very interested in addressing that, but he is interested in telling the truth in data. So you've got this little paradigm, that he's inherited, and then you've got a real interest in adhering to data rather than dogma. And kids love this because that's what helps us succeed, is accurate data. A friend says, "How do I look?" And you lie to them and tell them they look great when they look terrible. And then they go around dressing that way because, they're not, they're clueless. They go around dressing that way, and because you lied to them. If you say, "I don't think that looks good, I think you should change this, that, and the other," now they've got accurate data to respond to. Whenever you lie, you betray the adult. Whenever you, as a pharmaceutical company, you suppress certain results in studies and show the positive ones, you're setting the adults up around to fail. And of course, you are not being intelligent, because it's not intelligent to make billions of dollars while addicting people on OxyContin, if you want to look at the OxyContin scandal and the trade-off of people's lives and sanity in order to make short-term corporate profits. It's disgusting. Or the DuPont scandal with C8. Let's just hide all the data that we've put a toxic birth defective chemical in the bloodstream of the global population. Why? So people can flip their pancakes easily. It's like, what? How's that a good trade-off? Well, let's not talk about it. You see, the adolescent, the child, is scared of being punished. They're always hiding things. And this is another domain and arena that distinguishes the adult from the child and adolescent. The child likes secrets because the child is helpless. The child can't respond. Did you tell the truth? The child is trying to think, let's see, am I going to be beaten more for saying, no, I lied, and then how dare you lie? Or, or telling the truth, how dare you did this thing that you told the truth about? How am I going to do it? The child can't respond. It's not the child's fault that nobody told them this. It's not the child's fault that they're being constantly taught a lack of discipline and hypocrisy from the president down about all kinds of things, but that suddenly they, as a 6-year-old, is supposed to behave more ethically than our president. I mean, this is not a 6-year-old's job. A 6-year-old's job is to copy and learn what works in the dysfunctional environment in which they're born. So you have this secrecy and hiding, and then you have the defense, like, go away, I don't like that, the adolescent. And then you have the adult that says, I want the data, and I want you to have the data, and then we can respond. We can respond with the data. So one little shortcut and heuristic into adulthood is you have sympathy, and this ties into the child's whole model is pleasing and manipulation. It's like, what do I have to do to survive around these giants? You like it when I look like this. Okay, I'll look like this. You give me attention when I'm naughty, so I'll be naughty if I need attention. And so you have sympathy, which is, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be what this world needs me to be to survive. Then you have antipathy, the adolescent. I'm better than this. I don't like this. Is all dumb. The hypocrites, the idiots, what idiot parents I have. They lied about this, and then they can't even tell that that's the wrong thing to say to mom. What idiots. He thinks he's going to have sex with her after he says this. What a dumb idiot he is. No one does that. And so you have the teenager criticizing the whole environment and feeling just absolutely frustrated about being stuck in the absurdity of our present environment. And then you have the synthesis. So what do I have to do? I want nothing to do with it. And then you have the synthesis of, the adult is, okay, how am I going to respond? That's dumb. I didn't like that. That felt miserable. I got sick doing that. I don't want to be raped anymore by you. No, and I don't want to be punished for telling the truth. And I don't like that. And yet, so what's my response? See, that's the adult. Not just the reaction, but the sympathy, the antipathy, the synthesis. the coming together of, in this situation at this time, I'd rather spend my time with a thief than a rapist. Those are my two choices in this situation. Okay, I'll pick the thief. Or I'm not a woman. I've got millions of dollars in cash on me. I'd rather spend the time with the rapist for this particular journey because I want to protect the millions and I'm unlikely to be personally molested, so I'll pick the rapist. That's an adult response to difficult life challenges. And I really like the fact that Jordan is straightforward with the fact that much of our world is filled with suffering, with insanity, with absurdity, with corruption. But that fixing it is not as easy as the adolescent's, pie in the sky, just, oh, everyone needs to do this. And, moving towards the simple adolescent answer is not as effective. You've got to work with the situation. So you have sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. The adult is in synthesis. The adult is weighing the pros and cons, and is also witnessing. The adult is the witness. You have the action. I just did this. I don't know why I did it. I just did it. That might be the child. I just knocked over a vase and saw what happened. And then you have the reaction. Don't do this. I don't want that. And the reaction is more the adolescent, where you ask the adolescent, what do you want? They sit there. What do you think? And they'll sit there but you say, do this. No, I don't want to do this. And so there's this reaction where in many adult relationships, you ask your partner, what would make this a great relationship? And they're like, I don't know. But then you say, well, let's do this. And they say, no, I don't want to do that. So you're in reaction. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know, but I don't want to do that. And so you're in adolescent. And it's the proactivity, the action, the reaction, the observation, the connection with the environment, and the response, the proactivity. This is what I want to do in the future. Now, this implies a couple of interesting correlations, and one of the correlations is with trauma. Trauma is, coping mechanisms around trauma. So trauma is a phenomena, an equation that begins with stimuli in the environment threatens my life. Could be a financial threat, could be a social threat, could be a physical threat. Situation happens that threatens my life. It's too big for me to know how to respond to. I look around for people to help, and there's no one who I trust and who is coming forward to help me. And so the crisis continues at that level. And what happens is we regress. We go back into a reptilian fight, flight, freeze coping mechanism that kept us alive as reptiles millions of years ago. And so it's very reactive in that domain. We're just deciding whether to attack it, whether to run away, or whether to freeze to stay alive, because there's no adult present in the environment or inside. And so when you have repressed trauma, and we have this as a culture, meaning as a culture, there is no safe place to deal with sexual abuse. As a culture. Now, there's little pockets. You might be able to go to this office. It's closed on Sunday. But I'm being abused on Sunday. What do you do? Well, I'll just go into trauma and freeze until Monday morning. And then, make an appointment. And I've got 15 minutes for you. I can do this and this. Well, what do I do? Well, we don't really have anything to help you with. And so, when the environment does not match the level of trauma that we experience, we enter the traumatic and sociopathic state of the fight, flight, freeze coping mechanism. You cannot be an adult in that terrain because the reptilian brain is 200 million years old beginning when, crocodiles are roaming the earth. It's a deep program. It's a very instinctual area of the brain. And if you feel your survival is in jeopardy, you're not going to listen to any new age shit or my lecture or anything like that. You're going to be doing programs that kept the species alive for 200 million years. And those aren't discussing responsibility. That's and when you've got help out of those crises, in part because this weight lifts and you can be a human being again. You have feelings again, you can cry, you can start to respond, and someone else responds to you. How can I help? What do you need? So that's what the adult does. And it's always one of responding. I'm in a state of PTSD and fight, flight, freeze. What? And the adult asks, what can I do about it? Well, let me read a book on PTSD. Great one is The Body Keeps the Score. Let me do this protocol, do this protocol also. Okay. I read that EMDR can be one of the better protocols. But then it's like, well, where do I find a good EMDR person? I don't know. Well, what if they're not available right when I need them? That's a problem. Well, what about this? Well, what if I could get one on my own computer and do personal EMDR programs? Good idea. Well, what do we have to do for that? Okay, well, let's hunt around. We have to do a Google search. Well, how do we do this and this and that? Okay, well, let's do this. So now there's an app. It's actually in the Microsoft store for $20 and can do EMDR work on that. And it's like, how does it work? Yes, it seems to work. All this energy flows through when I'm doing this and that and the other, and I have less load to carry on the other side. I can make more conscious decisions. Okay, well, what does the adult respond to that? Well, let me make a point to do more of that. Well, what if I forget? Well, let's make a note. It's this constant dialogue with your best friend. Your adult is your best friend because it's constantly looking at the situation. Now, this brings up another point because as human beings, we're like rings in a tree. So if you're a pine tree and you're 1 year old, you got one ring. And then you're 2 years and you have two rings. And then you're 100 years old and you've got 100 rings of, you see that if you cut a tree down. So we're like that because it's not like year one in the pine tree vanishes and the tree is only this thick. No, all of the wood of that entire history and that psychic domain within the 100 years is all contained inside the cambium of the tree. So the present may be the fresh year, the current moment, but the tree's structural stability comes from all the years before. And it's the same with the adult, that every year in our entire past, through memory, which is a biological and a psychological phenomena, meaning memory is part of our consciousness and it's part of our biology. And so in the psychological self, which is what we're dealing with here, then the adult is the one who comforts and protects the child, who goes back and listens to the feelings the child has. You see, they're all happening in real time. When a handsome, tall man approaches you and smiles in a certain way that reminds you of the betrayal or the gold or whatever it was that happened at 7 years old. Something good happened associated with that smile, or something terrifying happened. The 7-year-old remembers, oh my gosh, that's happening again, positive or negative. It may not have happened to the adolescent, so the adolescent doesn't really care, other than they remember that it was a big deal for the child and that ruined their life and this and that and the other. And then it's the adult's job to listen and say, yes, he does have the same smile. And yes, he's about 6'1". And yes, that really was scary before. And no, nobody was there to help you when that happened. And yes, he's also from South Africa. Yes, that's true. That's a good point. And yes, he did hurt you before. That's also a good point. But this is not the same person. And I, the adult, will take care of us this time. 7 years old, you couldn't take care of yourself. Now, we're going to take some intelligent measures about this. First of all, I'm going to comfort you, and we'll relive and deal with some of that. And you can have a chance to talk about how that felt, good or bad. And the adolescent can say, not again, all this. And the adult is the one that responds. The adult listens and says, well, thank you for telling me all this. That's good data. And I want to know what you have to say, 7-year-olds. And I want to know how you see things. Yes, he's got the same kind of teeth as that other person. But I've got logic. Teeth have nothing to do with it. The thing that we really need to be paying attention to, you don't need 7-year-old to worry about people with that kind of teeth. What you have to worry about is how much someone is going to lie or tell the truth. And the best way to look at some of those things are to spend time with people who know that person well over time. Do they lie? Do they do this and that and the other? That's a good thing to do. And if you will do that, then that's a great thing. That's wonderful if you will do that. So I'm going to respond that way. I'm going to meet and talk with this and this and the other, and we're not going to put ourselves in that situation until we have more information. We all on board in there? You okay, 7-year-old? You okay, 12-year-old? You okay, 15-year-old? 20-year-old's okay with that? No, I can't stand doing all this. It's like, why do I have to do this because my 7-year-old has these feelings? You don't, 20-year-old. I will do it. I'm the adult. You take those steps. You take those steps to respond, to protect the child, to understand the child, to comfort the child. Because they are a part of you. And if you don't do that, they're going to act out and run away because he has got white teeth. Well, that affects you. If you, as the adult, don't respond and understand and listen to that, that affects you. If you, as the adult, don't respond and listen to the adolescent, that affects you. If the adolescent, every time someone says, oh, I've got a good idea, why don't you do this? The adolescent says, no, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Go away. If that's the response, and someone says, here's a way to make $1 million, I did, and the adolescent says, no, I'm not going to do that, go away. Well, it's like, okay, well, then you don't get your $1 million. It's dumb. But if you are the adult, you can say, well, you don't have to do it. You can reject everything. That's fine. And you can stand on the sideline and criticize in my ear everything the other person's doing wrong. Go right ahead. But me, the adult, I want to do this. Because I want to take care of all you inside. And I want to take care of my family. And I want to take care of this. I want to respond. And so I'm going to do this. You can do this, adolescent. And I'll listen to you. And I appreciate all that you have to say. But I, the adult, am going to do this. And so, this is what I'm going to do. And in fact, me as the adult, I'm actually not sure what to do. So I'm going to read a book, and I'm going to assess the qualifications of the author. And I'm not sure how to assess the qualifications of the author. So I'm going to read an article on that. How do you know if an author is worth reading? Let's spend an hour or two on that. I like this point. I hate this point. I agree with this. I don't agree with this. This seems good. It doesn't seem good. How am I going to respond as the adult? And this is how we grow up. Well, this is maturity in a very technical sense. Like a watermelon is not mature when it's this size. It's not mature. You reach a point of full potential through this part that can both witness and respond, and then respond to the reality that creates. Like, I thought this was a good idea based on this and this and this, and I see I made a big mess of it. Well, how do I respond to that? Well, I don't know. Well, am I going to prioritize finding that out? Well, let me do this and let me do that. And so it's a very dynamic and engaging process of constant change, growth, innovation, and success. Because the adult is your best friend. Their job is to grow and succeed in ways that you didn't know how to do before. And to listen and attend to the inner parts the way your parents didn't know how, and your teachers didn't know how, and many of your friends don't how. And it's your adult's job to take care of you when your wife or your husband doesn't know how to take care of you, and your best friend insults you and undermines you rather than doing this. It's your adult's response to say, aha, here's how I can take care of myself and repair that damage and have some more distance with this person and do this. And how's that working? And the adult, again, says, well, it was good for this, but now nobody wants to be around me because they don't want to be responsible. Well, how do we create new friends? Okay, well, we could try this. Well, let's try that for 10 minutes and this for 10 minutes and see what works, or an hour or this. So there's this endless dynamic process. And of course, we're always in a field that is much bigger than we are. There's always 1,000 more ways to spend our time than than this or that way to spend our time. There's an endless amount of different ways to respond, and we have to learn what those are. So the adult is responding to create well-being. In that way, there's an element of transcendence. Because, of course, the child can't just transcend. When a parent slaps a child and the child feels, oh, nobody loves me. Oh, it's unfair, nobody loves me. And now I'm being hit for crying. Oh, no, I can't even cry. Nobody loves me about that. It's so unfair. This is horrible. And the adolescent can become bitter about that. Those bastards, I'll get him and this, that. And then, but the adult can say, cry on my lap. It is unfair, and you're right, and that's true, and I can hold you, and I'll do something about it. I'll talk to your parents. I'll get you away from these parents. That what idiots, hitting a 6-year-old. And so the adult can respond and say, I'm adopting this child, and I'm going to take this and this and this step, and no, I'm not going to do this. Now, and then the adult, of course, when we have faulty systems, like if we take that little angle of how would a healthy adult respond to a highly abusive, addictive parent beating their child, when the protocol would be all kinds of bizarre trauma that might cause PTSD for the child because we're in an ignorant culture. We don't respond as a culture. We're not in an adult culture. It's bizarre. So there's no adult that says, well, we're going to respond with this and that and the other and follow the data and measure this. There's all this focus on not being caught, not being punished. There's a lot of child and adolescent energy, whether it's in local government. So if you do what's healthy to protect that child, will you be arrested? There's all this kind of stuff. And so the child is, of course, betrayed again by the system, because when the adult has to be thrown in jail to protect themselves or be punished for protecting the child to fit in the system, well, we see the crisis with the missing part in the cultural psyche that is the one that responds with insight, with data, and continues to learn and grow towards a more intelligent world where there's more and more well-being per unit of energy invested. Now, we have, as part of that kind of similar process, because there's this triad of energy, sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. action, reaction, proaction. We have also dependency, independence, and co-creation, where you go through the phase of I need you, and then you go into the phase of relationship. I don't need you, and get away, and nobody's going to tell me what to do, the independence, the reaction, and then you go into co-creation and saying, well, that bit there I don't really like, but I like this bit, and let's make the time, meaning let's respond. It's going to take 6 hours to separate these two. So let's make the time to spend 6 hours and separate these two, and we will respond. I don't know how to respond. Okay, well, how do you figure that out? Well, who's blocking it? Is it I'm 4 years old and I'm expecting to be punished, so I can't respond because every time I say anything, I'm punished? Well, you're no longer 4 years old. Let me hold you, the 4-year-old. And is there anyone else? Can we go to an older age and hear what they have to say? And then how can we co-create? We are neither dependent nor independent. It's a little bit of both. And the artistry is in realizing that potential. Age-wise, you have to be at least 25 years old before you have this sense of, a strong integrated framework of the adult. It takes a certain amount of mature, but you can be 65 or you can die a child, or you can also be in an unregulated and unintegrated state where you're an adult for 10 minutes, or you're an adult when you decide what to do with your burnt toast. I know the thing to do with burnt toast. It's throw it in the compost. Or if it's smoking, throw it out the window and tell the fire detector it's not a real fire. That's what you do to burnt toast. And I know what to do with my clothing, so I will put on my clothes. And I know what to do to drive to work. But when someone says I'm scared and depressed and I need help, I don't know what to do. And I don't know what to do about not knowing what to do. So I just walk away and avoid them and lose another friendship. So what do I do about that? Well, that's where how to support people talking about all their emotions. Maybe there's a book. Maybe there's an article. Maybe there's a Quora article. Maybe there's this. Maybe I could write about that in my journal. And this is where a lot of integration happens, is in writing or talking. It's like, gee, I came into this situation. I don't know what to do. Whew, that's a tough one. What are all your options? Well, I could do this, or this. And how much do each of those options cost? What's the upside? What's the downside? Which one do you think would work the best? Based on what? Past experience? Do you think you should get some advice? How important is this? These are all responses, and they're all good adult responses to be in this witness, in this learning, in this inquiry, in this curiosity. The adult is also with the element of transcendence. And the transcendence, I say, you get stuck in it. I'm, scared. I don't know. The adult is the one that is bigger than the individual part that's scared. So there's one part in us that freezes and is terrified and says, I don't want to I don't want to say anything. I just want to hide here under the covers. And that's there. Now, as the child, we're stuck there. But if we have an adult element that we're familiar with, that we're friends with, then a part shows up that we relate to and says, is there anything I can do to help? And the child says, no, just let me stand in the covers for 10 minutes. The adult says, do you want me to get you a drink? Do you need any water? Do you need this, that, and the other? No, just leave me under here. And the adult says, okay, I'll just be with you. I'll be with you for 10 minutes and we'll calm down, we'll breathe, we'll stand to the covers. How you doing now? Don't talk to me. I'm afraid I'm going to get punished. Have I done anything to punish you? No, but the adolescent's always punishing me. He's always criticizing and complaining. Everything I do is always wrong. So that adolescent sounds very frustrated. Maybe I'll go talk to them. Like, oh, I'm stuck in my adolescent now. You bastard, why are you wasting? I don't know what to... It's like, it sounds like you've got a lot of opinions, adolescent. And you're like, could we write those down? I don't want to write anyone down. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Well, what would you like to do? What do you think is the good way? Well, I found writing it down helpful. So you have this process. The adult is the one that isn't stuck, the one who's always outside the situation, looking down and saying, this is an interesting situation. There's a lot of pain here. There's a lot of opportunity here. What would happen if we did this? What would happen if we did that? The adult is curious, creative, caring, loving, responsive, intelligent, wants to see what's going on, wants to listen, understands that responding is freedom, understands that responding is power. Oh, maybe it'll just go away. I don't know what. Maybe it will. But the adult knows that if I say, well, I'm going to make the choice. I'm not going to leave it to see what'll happen. I'm going to make the choice. I'm going to do this, and then we'll assess next week. We'll check in next week and see how that approach is going. We'll check in with the people around us. We'll check in with our partners, with our investors, with ourselves, and we will again respond. And I'm not sure it's the right decision. Well, you're right. I'm not sure it is either. But do you have a better decision? Is there anyone we could consult about a better decision? Well, how am I going to respond? So this is always the process of responsibility. Now, one of the things that is so important about both trauma is a key into the adult because, first of all, if you're dissociated at a young age because of trauma, you can't become an adult in that domain. You may be fine water skiing and fine this and fine this, but then someone wants to have sex with you, and if you haven't dealt with your sexual abuse and trauma, now you're a child again. I don't know what to do, and I'm frozen. And the other person has no clue because we're in an emotionally illiterate culture, and so then they don't know how to respond to that. And the adolescent says, go away, get out of here. And then it's like, well, that was a good person. That's what part of me wants, a healthy relationship. I don't know what to do. I'm ashamed. I'll just walk away. That's leaving a child and adolescent to respond. We cannot become an adult until we can navigate consciously through the full terrain of our own psyche. That means look at every event that happened and understand it and feel the emotions about it and have a sense of what to do about it. Because that's what's so difficult about this terrain, is that when as an adult we don't know how to deal with it. It's like we don't even feel like an adult. Like every time we get near that event, we get sucked in and we relive the event. We don't feel like we're watching the event and deciding what to do about it. We believe we're 4 years old again, and what am I going to do? It's going on forever. I can't stop. And we lose the witness. We lose the part that's responding to that. And so then you have to respond to that. You say, I get sucked in, so I need help. Iron John, a book about men, this talking about, getting help, going in there with your dog, bucketing things out, doing the work, writing stuff down. You need help. And your adolescent, of course, isn't going to do any help because they're scared of all kinds of things, but they don't know how to respond. You may need to get an adult therapist if you can find one. Plenty of therapists are, get into it because they have issues of their own, and the models are not always perfect, but they may be better than nothing. So how do we respond to this domain where we need help and we don't know who to trust because everyone's scary? Well, that's where you need to, it's really good to have a good friend. in some area of your life. Someone who loves you more than you do, who sees you more than you do when you're in these small places. That's a great thing to have. But have you pushed all of them away? That it's because, adolescents do that. Because, there's a sense of freedom from, no, I don't have to respond to anything. No, you don't, but you have no control of your life. You are just in pure rebellion, and you can't generate a life out of that. You've got to show up for your customers' appointments if you want to be paid. You've got to have a bank account if you want to deposit a check. There's stuff you have to do if you want to respond. The adolescent doesn't want anything to do with it, and so is impotent in many ways. So there's a need to be able to face the full terrain in the psyche, because if we can't, we go into reaction. Meaning if every time we get near feeling I need someone, we become highly volatile and reactive and irrational, you can't be an adult in that terrain. So you have to unpack that feeling. You have to figure out where does it go down to. You have to create a reservoir of flow with that wound. And you have to begin repairing that wound with awareness, with steps like we're not going to do that again. That's a response. That's healthy. We are going to do this again. We're not going to do that again. We are going to do this for the first time. And we're going to see how it works, and we're going to test it. We're not going to just get into a newly built prototype plane. We're going to test it out on a lighter issue and try this and try that. We're going to respond as an adult. So trauma work is essential to gaining or regaining the full access to all of our emotions and all of our memories without going into reaction. Until we can do that, we cannot be an adult. And for this, we need help. Constellation therapy, group therapy, truth-telling, journaling, meditation with a witness, poetry, art, dialogue, exploring things, more truth-telling, EMDR, dance and movement, going into all areas of the body, doing yoga will take you into many of these areas. It's like, I can't stand this posture. I can't stand it. I'm claustrophobic. It's like, the adult can come in and say, how can I help? How old do you feel? What's the emotion? What's the memory? I don't want to go in there. It's like, okay, let's back out. Do you think you're going to die? What could that be? The adult's job is to maybe do a little research and say, well, I remember now. It's my job. You don't have to go in there. I remember, and I'm going to make it safe for you. Well, now the child can go into that terrain because someone is finally taking care of them in that terrain. This also is part of the movement of the adult, which is towards integration. When there is no adult and the 4-year-old is terrified and never wants to see a man or a man's penis again, and the 7-year-old feels interested in the power. Sexual abuse survivors, for example, have a lot of power because they're more sexually experienced, and they understand that they've got this ability to override the egos of these giants around them. And so they'll often manipulate, maybe try and flirt with the teacher to elicit control and make everyone scared of her, because that feels better than being the terrified, helpless one who has no power and who's no one's protecting. And so, you have that adolescent dynamic, but it's not until an adult says, no, you don't get to fuck around with a 4-year-old. You don't get to do that. And we're going to look for the signs of that. We're going to see that that doesn't happen here and here and here. That's where I'm putting my boundary. It isn't until that happens that the 4-year-old can go back to being a 4-year-old and keep growing rather than staying stuck in trauma and waiting for the next violation. It isn't until that can start growing, that the adolescent can return to some of its innocence and healthy curiosity and development. And it isn't until that you can have an integrated psyche. And I talk about the things this culture doesn't want to talk about, because that's the area we're disintegrated. Anything in taboo terrain is areas that have been split off from the healthy arena of ecological cultural integration and made taboo. So that's what needs to be owned. That's what needs to be felt. That's what needs to be talked about, and the impact needs to be shared by the circle around us. So, that's my bias towards, controversial, why talk about incest as opposed to, you could say the exact same thing if you were desperate because someone stole your chocolate toy. And your parents said you had to share, but you didn't want to share, but you didn't want to be hated by your parents. So you didn't want to share, but you didn't want to be hated. So, it's either way, it splits apart. And go back in meditation and listen. It's like you get your own chocolate toys and you get a parent who will like you even when nobody can play with your chocolate toy. Finally, peace for the child. And somebody who understands. So the full range of emotions is accessed through the exploration of trauma. The part of that is also, as the spiritual adult, there is the transcendence of attachment as, in every mythology, there is a spiritual tradition, there is a point of sacrifice and a point of transcendence. So in the Christian ethic, there's the mythology of Jesus being out in the desert, being tempted by Satan. You could have all this power. You could just throw yourself off the cliff and God would protect you. Why not have all the women you want? And, so there's the temptation to say, if you will basically do what I want, as the addictive coping mechanism, as the pain management system, as the lower ego, then you can have all this stuff. But otherwise, you can't. And if you are in too much pain, if you are in too much fear because you haven't done your trauma work and your child work, you will not be able to face that set of questions and pick yourself and pick the adult response. The adult response is what brings goodness. It brings life. It brings a healthy future. The addictive response destroys life. Oh, wouldn't it be fun to fuck around with that 14-year-old girl? I'll bet we could get her drunk and do this and that and the other. So, the power we could feel. Like if you're terrified and anxiety and feel small and feel pain and feel humiliation, nobody would know. That's something to consider. When you understand all of your pain, when you understand all of your grief, when you've mourned the broken innocence of dysfunctional parents, when you see how absolutely hard it is for some part to let go because the pain is so intense and it's managing that pain and distracting from it is so tiring to feel that. And it's so lonely to be in there all alone. It's like you can go into sleep. You can't face that. I can't face it. You take another drink to numb it down. The adult and the spiritual adult is the transcendent human being. Says, I can love you in that pain. And I see it. And I'll be here with you. And I won't drink. I'll be here with you. And together we will be enough. Me and my best friend. Together we will be enough. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to betray you. I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to be here with you. That's an energy field that almost none of us have access to. But if we do, that's strong enough to break an addiction. Now what happens then? You feel the full intensity of the pain that addiction is managing. You feel it. Or you go numb if you can't. You feel that full intensity. And you feel it with yourself. With help. Spirit help. Therapeutic help. Circle help. You show up for that part. That's when a possibility field of the light shadow, meaning the positive potential that you represent, is born. That moment, when you turn into the addiction, the rage, that's an addiction. The violent acting out, it's an addiction. The screaming, it's an addiction. When you turn into that and say, no, I'm going to face the terror, the hurt, the smallness. If I can't do it, I'm going to get help. I'm going to get a teddy bear. I'm going to get a dog. I'm going to get a fish. I'm going to go walking in nature and take a breather. I'm going to bring in a good friend. I'm going to write about this. But I'm going to show up for myself here. And when you do that, that's when the light potential opens up. That's when you see who you can be on the other side of addiction, on the other side of reaction, on the other side of lies, on the other side of the secrets, that you're more committed to hiding than you are to reaching your potential. Give them back up. When the agendas, I want to have a power hit more than I want anything else. It's fun, yeah, more fun than this and that and the other, but it doesn't have a candle to the potential of who we are as human beings. So I'm going to breathe into that energy, and I'm going to go for what's beautiful. I'm going to go for the truth. I'm going to go for the goodness in that field. I'm going to go for what's released and unleashed in that choice. It's a form of transcendence. Transcending pain management, transcending addiction, transcending attachment, in order to create the freedom to navigate within the psyche. Well, once you have that freedom to navigate within the full range of the pain and the beauty of that psyche, you can now partner with the horror and the pain and the beauty and the truth to form an alliance, to create a stronger world. So let's look at some of the domains to be an adult. So this could be a point to take a breather. It's been an hour or whatever it's been. Okay, take a breather. But the next step is looking at the different categories of being an adult. So now that we know that being an adult is the ritual of responding in a way that is intelligent to create well-being, what are some of the arenas in which it's most important to respond? And there's a couple of different ways to look at this. First, in an abstraction, Abraham Maslow identifies that all of us as human beings have needs. The needs to survive physically. The need for security in that survival. And in a capitalist framework, this includes having money. And if you look in the most broad sense around survival and security of survival, we're looking at things that you and I can do that increase our ability to survive, including money. So, for example, I have a cash fund in a, safety deposit box. Why? Well, as banks have moved towards internet technology, who's to say that there might not be a freeze on a bank if a bank is hacked at some point? But of course, we still need to be able to respond daily, and suddenly the debit card doesn't work. So having a credit card, a debit card, and some cash increases the opportunity to survive. And when you're in a culture where who you are matters very little and how much money you have matters a great deal, responding in a way that creates security includes learning how to invest, learning how to create, learning how to manage money. As well as, of course, if you're in an earthquake-prone region like I am in California, having an emergency plan, and every little step that you take to increase your ability to respond. I bought a generator. Why? Well, what if there's a contracting job that needs power away from a house or out in a wetlands area where there's no power? Well, it's available. What if there's a power outage? It's available. So these things are very practical as we move towards increasing our ability to respond, to be secure in our physical, emotional, mental well-being. The third need that every human has, particularly when we look at our history as a pack mammalian species, is the ability to create love and belonging. How is that done? Having regular visceral contact with people is one way. We empathize with the people our bodies attuned to with regular exposure over time. And so having a partner, particularly a healthy and a good partner, is increasing our ability to not only survive, but have a sense of love and belonging. One of the things that I've really noticed over the last year or so of owning a dog is the sense of welcome, and also the biological component of things like oxytocin. When you have a safe physical connection for 6 or 7 seconds, there's a sense of well-being, because your body, remembering millions of years of history, knows that when you're in close proximity to friendly bodies, you are safer than if you're isolated. Even the genetics of, a lone monkey being attacked by a tiger is much more vulnerable than, monkeys behaving in a pack formation, letting each other know about threats, helping feed each other, groom each other, etc. When you look at self-esteem, you have things such as the person you want to be. And one of the things, because it builds on love and belonging, one of the things that we want to be is lovable. We want it to be possible for others to love and accept us, so that we can have that love and belonging. And this ties in, of course, to the cultural ranking system. We're, very much in a framework of being very extroverted and masculine as a Western culture. And so having some extroverted traits makes us more acceptable to other people. This is difficult for sensitives such as myself, because there's a conflict between the traits that bring out the most psychological and physical well-being naturally and the traits that lead to the most love and acceptance of other people. But self-esteem is becoming the person you want to be and seeing that you are that person. So whatever it is that you admire, being courageous, being articulate, being, someone that cares about other people who need help, these are things that we admire. So when we embody those traits, our sense of self-esteem goes up, the sense that I did the things that help me perform and behave in a way that I respect in others. And these tie closely in with the culture, so they're not always, absolute in the sense it's by no means absolutely beneficial that everyone is as extroverted or materialistic as they are. But it's not a bad thing either. It's not a bad thing to have material resources. And so you can have both, and so a certain amount of energy goes to satisfying the cultural ranking system, and a certain amount of energy can go to responding to those parts that are just as important, but are not ranked in the culture. There is no Fortune 500 list for the most self-aware people in a country, or the best mothers, or the most nurturing pet owners. We don't rank those things in our culture. They're vitally important, but we don't rank them. And so it's important to move beyond the culture and really think about the people we want to be. Now, once we have this fourth level, and you can measure the intelligence and health of a country and a culture by how many people are secure in their survival, what percentage of the people, I should say, what percentage of their people are secure in their survival, have a sense of rich, meaningful love and belonging, and like themselves as they are. Western culture is, doing an erratic job in that, with some countries like the US being more volatile than another version in Denmark. And so what do we do with that data? Well, we might learn, we might respond to discover which countries are doing which parts of this really well. But the next thing we need to do is develop our potential. It's a curiosity, it's a drive, it's a need to learn things and become good at them. Now, as this matures, it moves outward into the community. And what's actually happening is, as we're meeting these different needs, we're migrating through the brain structure of a human being. The survival is about the reptilian brain, that fight, flight, freeze, to do whatever it takes to survive. The security, you're starting to move into more the limbic brain, more the conscious self, where there's a sense of continuity and strategy. Love and belonging, you're starting to move into the more empathic centers of the brain, caring about other people, enjoying affection. Self-esteem, thinking about who I want to be, imagination, the future, and developing excellence. That's something that we all ultimately aspire to. And it's worth noting that one of the healthiest countries that I've found on the planet, Denmark, because every Danish citizen is secure in their survival and is highly educated and has health care and a very beautiful network of support. That includes the ability to migrate from different jobs, that the Danish population likes their work more because they choose their work based on this desire to grow. They choose their university. They actually get paid to go to university. And so every Danish person I interviewed had a university degree. And what you can see is that when you have highly educated, secure people, they want to work and they want to be at their best. Every single one I interviewed was employed in a job that they liked. Now, at that point, it's not about money. They could have quit their job and lived quite comfortably. But there's this drive to grow. And so we have that. And of course, this is the transcendence point where we go from the individual back to the community. Because the circle goes that if the community will take care of the individual when it is vulnerable and is helpless, every single infant is born into this world vulnerable and helpless. And in Denmark, both parents will get paid maternity leave as a matter of national priority. And so those children have more secure, attached relationships with their parents. And everyone witnessing this understands that human beings are more important than money. But what do you get when you get a well-educated, secure culture in a beautiful environment where everyone knows that people are more important than money? You get investment. You get interest and curiosity in studying topics that interest you and translating that into careers that are fulfilling and allow growth. And so as your skills reach a certain point of excellence, that's when you naturally want to be of service to other people. You start to move and give back. We need to see our fruits of our labors going out into the world. And we move towards excellence and thinking beyond just ourselves as an individual. In fact, the more secure we are as individuals in a healthy psychological framework, the more interested we are in other people, the more interested we are in helping and being of service to other people. So we move towards excellence and giving our gifts back to the community. And because this is part of nature's cycle, if you look at a banana tree produces a banana out of the soil, and then it gives back more soil as it finally dies. A tree actually creates soil. It doesn't take soil. It takes initial amount of soil to grow, but then it actually creates more soil than it took. And so you have this natural principle within nature that things grow, that things expand in complexity and give back more than they take. And we have that need. We have that drive. And so we respond as an adult to facilitate that, to say, I don't know where to get medicine. Well, how could I do that? Well, I'm going to need more money. Well, and sometimes there's these double binds where this isn't thought of as a culture thinking of its people as its most valuable resources. But they are. When you have a deeply aligned, educated, competent group of people as your country base, you grow as a culture. So this is something to respond to. Where are we stuck? Where are we not growing? I'm doing good on money and material stuff, but I don't feel love and belonging. Okay, so the adult figures out how to respond to that. It's one of the reasons I'm so interested in intentional community. Is intentional community facilitates. If you travel around the world, I've lived in various intentional communities. If you travel around, it facilitates love and belonging. So this is one area to respond. The other is the inner ages, which we've already touched briefly on. So where is the emotional charge stuck? Where is there unresolved, unintegrated energy that is available to bring back online into daily life? Because if we say, I can't think of that, it's too overwhelming. Well, it means you can't have access to that energy. There's this overwhelming, intense energy stored in an emotional charge that we dissociate from, which means that it's not feeding, it's not nourishing the present psyche. We're actually spending energy to push it away. I don't want to remember that. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to do this, that, and the other. And it's more responsible. It's more empowering if we'll go back into those arenas and understand and work with that energy until it's available to us, so that we're not wasting energy depleting our reserves to fight and suppress something in the present or in the past, but actually working to harness that to bring out our best. So we have the child, the adolescent, the young adult, the present time, but we also have the future. We have this wonderful sense, these frontal lobes, the imagination. What really separates us from animals is the ability to actually tend the future as a garden, to give a gift to the future self, to say, well, I don't really need this now, but maybe my future self would need it, so I'm going to give it to him. I'm going to put some money in a retirement fund. I'm going to increase my earning power. Maybe my future self could use that. I'm going to read this book. I don't know what this book is for, but might come in handy for my future self. Maybe they'd want to reference that data. Here's this interesting person on the plane. Let me talk to them. Maybe my future self will have some positive way to relate to this person. And so connecting with the future self. We also have the responsibility as an adult to decide how to allocate our time, because one of the biggest dances to do as an individual ego, the part of us that feels separate from everything else in the rest of the world, there's of course a big debate about that, because you can't take a single thing and really keep it separate. You say, okay, well, there's this nose. Well, can you have that nose working out of separate from the face? No, it's just separated by language. You cut off this nose, and very rapidly it stops being a nose. And if you don't repair the wound, the face stops being a face. And then the body stops being a body, and because they're interconnected. You say, well, I'm me, I'm separate from everyone else. And it's like, well, how did you get here? Could you just pop out from nowhere, or did your parents have something to do with it? And it's like, well, how did they get there? Well, they're parents. And so we are intricately connected, and every metric we look at. But we focus on this little bit here, because everything else out there that is part of us and part of our heritage and history is just so big. And so figuring out what's the priority. And this is where the hierarchy, if you're not surviving, the priority is surviving. If you're feeling secure in your survival, but you don't have any relationships, the priority is cultivating relationships. If you don't know how to cultivate relationships, then the priority is expanding the skills to cultivate relationships. And so you increase in love and your skills. I don't know how to love and belong. My parents didn't teach me that. My culture is very sociopathic in many ways. So I'm going to read this book and practice this and see if I can find someone that's interested in that conversation. So we have time allocation and different systems of time management, and reading books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and The Third Alternative by Stephen Covey, and how to separate, there's these urgent things that are not at all important, and then there are these important things that are not at all urgent, and how do you do less of the non-important urgent things and more of the important non-urgent things? It's like, someone wrote a text from who I hardly know who they are. You have to respond. Meanwhile, there's this interesting book to read that might take 3 or 4 hours and change your life, but it'll be there in 1,000 years. It's not urgent. How do we manage our time? This is part of who's the best friend, managing how we invest our time. Relationships are, of course, a really important area. We're social mammalian species is one part, but the other thing is the principle of synergy. The probability field increases exponentially the more people are involved, meaning what 10 people can do that are committed and aligned is 1,000 times more potent than what one person can do that is committed and aligned. It doesn't just go up by 10. It goes up exponentially. And of course, the more integrated and the more aware each person is, the bigger the probability field in both directions, meaning 10 people can destroy an economy. You think of the terrorist bombings and 9/11, etc. It's like, how many people did it take to shatter an economy, to change the airline industry? So you have negative synergy, but you also have positive synergy. How could 10 people committed to something really transform something? And so you always have this awareness of, on the one hand, the cult rewards you for doing it all on your own and being separate. That's the chauvinism of our culture. And on the other hand, the science says that if you can partner consciously with other people who are committed and on board, if you can partner, then you have a much bigger probability field. Similarly, tending relationships tie in a variety of ways. If you just blow your boss off repeatedly and get fired, then suddenly you can't take care of yourself. Because if you do that regularly, you're not going to be able to easily get a job with somebody else. And, I'll just be in business for myself. You're not in business for yourself. You have to serve your customers. Well, if you blow them off, you're not in business for yourself because you don't get any money. And so responding constantly, what's important? How can I respond? And then we get into, in relationship, the area of impact and the fact that everyone's unique. So if I do this and it makes you feel absolutely miserable and doesn't provide any value, and I don't care about that, well, then that person pushes you out of their life. And then someone else, there's this wonderful opportunity. If you would do this, it would mean the world to them. Yeah, but that's about you, and I'm all about me, so I don't care. I don't respond and make that possibility available. So when there's the reverse situation and they could do something that would really change your life, well, why are they going to do that? Because you've shown that you're operating in a sociopathic and self-centered framework of all about me. And so where's the growth? Where's the reciprocity? And so you have a really important area is significant relationships at work and at home and in culture and in community. The body. My body is sore. Well, I don't care about that. I'm just going to stay up all night and do this and that and the other. And then it's more sore, and I don't care about that. And then you don't respond to your body, and then suddenly you're in the hospital with a $100,000 medical bill, and then this, and then you can't work, and this, and it all falls apart because you don't respond. So we can respond constantly to say, well, how can I do that much a little bit better for my body, a little bit better for my mind, a little bit better for my future, and respond in other ways. Like, all this getting better is too much for me. So how do you respond to that? Well, let's balance in some play, and let's do this. And you have to regulate and attune to that. And these people are bumping into me because I'm not telling them where I am. Well, let me tell them. This is my boundary here. This is good. This is not good. And if they don't respond and keep banging into you, well, how do you respond to that? And so there's a constant process of responding in a way that increases well-being for you and for other people. And the more skillful, going back into skills, the more skillful you are at this, reading books, studying this, attending workshops, doing therapy, practicing, finding practice partners. Hey, anyone want to practice relationship skills with me? Let's do this. Let's see how it works. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let's respond. How could we do it so that it would work? Oh, okay, that works. But now it doesn't work for this other person. Okay, well, how is the way that it would work for you? Okay, so we have the this way it works for you and the this way it works for you, and I treat you this way and I treat you this way. Now you have a wider repertoire. You have more empowerment. You have more, I wonder if they're this type of person or this type of person. But then what about there's these other people over here? Well, you learn about them and you have a wider frame of response. And of course, our feelings. This makes me feel absolutely terrible. So the adult responds, well, how can I do something about that? What can I do? What are all my different responses, and what's the impact of that? And then it's a constant process of iteration and response in fluid movement. We have the arenas of money to respond to, the arenas of family, the arenas of growing competency, the arenas of work. We have goals. Goals amplify our focus. So if we write clearly written goals and then take action. If you think also of, the framework of where discipline comes in. Discipline comes in from the adult point of view. The child, does things. The adolescent says, I don't want to do things. And the adult says, I want to do things, and I'm going to do this to invest in the future. No, I don't want to take the garbage out, but I don't want a stinky kitchen even more. Or, no, I don't want to do this, so I have to respond by hiring someone. And then I have to respond to the bill by paying them. And then I have to respond to the reduced bank account by making more money. It's a constant process of response, but this is all empowerment and growth for the adult. So you have responsibility for agreements. I made this agreement, and what that does is it creates certainty. We live in this nexus of chaos and certainty, and we need a certain amount of certainty, and we need a certain amount of fluidity. So I can respond to all kinds of fluidity in the day, but I can't respond to you just walking out in the middle of this and no communication. I need a stability around this relationship. It's what you have a marriage for, or a relationship agreement. I will not have sex with other people without checking with you first. Why? Because with that amount of emotion involved, having an erratic and unpredictable pattern is too difficult for us to respond to. It's like I can't come back from a hard day's work, a difficult client, and really need some support, and I'm expecting it there, and then I find, they're off. They're off having sex with someone else. And I can't respond to all that. So I need certainty. I can't respond if I'm a company owner, my supplier may or may not bring the materials for the job. No, I need to know we had an agreement, you deliver these materials by this time at this price, and you're going to do it, even if it's inconvenient, to keep the relationship and to keep my job flowing so that my job doesn't break down just because you didn't feel like it. Your adolescent was rebelling against the idea of structured time during that day, and so my whole job doesn't get completed, and my employees, I don't get paid, and my employees don't get paid, all because, and so that's where the adult discipline comes in. I'm going to carry through and do the things that I said I'm going to do, and I'm going to respond by building skills and resources so that I can do that. So that, I may not feel like that, but I've got a backup plan. Or, if I'm a delivery company and my product needs to be delivered on time, and what if my this delivery person's truck broke down? Well, what's the backup plan? And what's the backup plan for the backup plan? Because when people have strong contingency plans and follow through, they respond and they are more responsible. We trust them more. We need trust and trustworthiness, so we value them more. So we feed. In a healthy relationship, we then pay them more in some format of respect, of consideration. And if we don't, well, we don't get to be those people's customers, because good delivery, good companies want to get paid. So you have the responsibility to respond to our goals. What are our goals? And then are we responding to those goals to actually do them? Well, not really. I don't really know what to do. Okay, you respond. You make a detailed action plan. And then you say, okay, well, there's this action plan. Then you say, well, when can I do this in my schedule? I'm going to do this at this time and this time. And then you respond. So that when someone calls you up and says, oh, I have an interesting tweet to discuss, you say, no, I'm sorry. I need to complete my goals here. So let's talk later. And you complete your goals so that you are responsive to yourself, to your future, to where you're wanting to go. And, the response to the environment. Gee, it seems like we're putting so many toxic chemicals into the atmosphere that cancer rates are going up and this and that and the other. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to set that in place as a future. So we respond. Well, could I use an electric car, a little electric motorcycle? What can I respond? Well, and it's a continual process. So, we have our thoughts, our feelings that need responses to. This feels terrible. Okay, what can I do to make that feel better? What can I learn from that? Well, I don't know what to do. I guess sometimes you're going to feel terrible. And so how am I going to cope so that I don't, ruin everyone else's life because I've had a bad feeling? How do we respond to that situation? A deep level of response that most of us don't get into is around the cultural belief system, the cultural template. Like, what do you do when your whole culture and country is spitting out unhappy, uneducated, depressed, and addicted and traumatized people? Well, if you care about people and yourself and the country, then you respond. Well, how do you respond? Well, you might take other samples and start advocating with local government, or start with your own family. Like, they do it over here very differently than they do it over in our place, and let's see if that improves the situation. And that's a very deep level of responsibility, because like a fish in water, we don't tend to examine our own culture. But it's a good thing to examine. There have been 10,000 cultures in human history. Every single one has thought they were right. As we speak, there are cultures all around the world. One's measuring plate size in the lip. Another is deciding whether or not the clitoris has been cut off with a rusty knife. We measure whether the penis has been chopped off with, is circumcision. And, it's like, well, is this really what we would do if we were designing something from scratch? That your highest ranking citizens have the biggest plate in their mouth? Is that useful? Or is that no longer a useful tradition? How about measuring the people who are kindest to their neighbors? Or could that be a better tradition of rank than plate size, or this or that? And so that's a response. And so the culture grows when we respond. It deteriorates when we stay in a stagnation pattern of just doing something because it's always been done before. So these are the domains, and our resources are imagination, data. You work with data, inner data and outer data, and you try and bring them together. Well, I had this vision. Well, how's it working out? It's terrible, all kinds of problems. Okay, so what would you do to fix those problems? Well, I think I would do this, 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 and this. How does that work out? Well, things get better. So maybe that vision is something to let go of. Well, it's my vision. Well, it's like, well, is it leading you to a place where you'd like to be? This is the adult's job to figure out. This is hard stuff. It's a lot of stuff. And the world is moving very fast. So this is a huge challenge. And one of the things we have are teachers. Reach for people who do things well better than you do. You don't reach for people who do the things you're trying to learn worse than you do, unless you want to be the teacher. And that's a good way to learn, is to teach something. We have the principle of investment. Always prepare to make things a little bit easier for the next generation, for the next person, for your future self. So you end a bad relationship. You're bitter, you're angry, you're hurt, How do you respond? Well, you could just get in the next relationship and be bitter and angry and hurt and but is that going to set that relationship up to win? So how can you respond? How can you invest? Well, if I did this meditation, I wouldn't be so bitter. Okay, I'm going to do that meditation. If I hired a house cleaner, I wouldn't be so irritated around stuff in the house. So I'm going to hire a house cleaner. If I bought this tool, I'd be able to do this job a little faster, a little bit more reliably. My clients would be happier. Aha, how's that? You're responding. And so goals and action plans. I'm having a problem with this. So let's set this goal and see if that'll solve the issue. And then I'm not doing a very good job with all this. I did this, and then this other problem came. So maybe studying ecological design. Like, how do you make decisions that improve everything, as opposed to just fixing this problem by creating this other one, and then fixing that problem by creating a new one, and which is kind of myopic thinking. But how could we design something that would solve numerous problems simultaneously. It's one of the reasons I'm so interested in 10xliving.org, a project of looking at how literally dozens of problems could be solved more effortlessly than our current cultural response. So these, and then of course measuring. Before you can respond to something, you need data. Before you have data, you've got to measure something. You've got to have distinction. So you've got to be able to decide what are the key metrics. Obviously, if your bank account just keeps getting lower and lower, and you don't bother measuring it until you're out of money, well, you haven't been able to be responsible because you weren't measuring the trend and looking at when you had to make different decisions by and how you could respond. So there's a variety of different ways that we need to respond. So this, and I've done another map on responsibility, but the adult is the part of us that cares more about us than the child, the adolescent, the reaction, the ego, etc. The adult cares more about us. The adult cares more about the country, in many cases, than the country cares about us. When's the last time your government has called up and said, how are you doing? How can we help? And then taken notes and then responded. Well, we don't have a government like that. We have governments that say this is the way it's going to be. If it fucks up your life, we don't care. That's not our job. So it's not a very adult government in terms of we just do what we do, make sure we keep our jobs and don't get fired and don't get punished. We have a very childish and adolescent government. But that's a reflection of the fact that many of us are predominantly run by either our actions, our sympathy, oh, I like that, I want to buy that, I want to do that. And our reaction, oh, I don't like that, go away. And then I like that and go away. And when you have a child and adolescent running the whole show, how do you build a future? How do you build friends who are going to trust you when you blow them off when you didn't want to deal with that? So you have a process of constant responding in a way that leads to long-term well-being. Thanks for joining me on this. It's been fun, and I'm going to sit down and figure out what areas I can respond to in my own life that take things to another level.